Hi, today we're in Flushing, Queens to visit St. Andrew Avellino's church. Not bad, those bells, huh? Hi, I'm Anthony Mangano, and welcome to a new episode of City of Churches. Today we're in Flushing, Queens on Northern Boulevard to visit St. Andrew's Church. Now this area can trace its roots back to 1645 when the Dutch settled here and named this area Vishken. Now that name changed a little bit because we call it Flushing now. During the American Revolution, well, this was a haven for British troops. In fact, Nathan Hale, who was an officer from George Washington's Continental Army, well, he was sent here by Washington disguised as a Dutch schoolmaster to spy on them. Unfortunately, he was captured near Flushing Bay and he was hanged. During the past 300 years, this area was mostly farmland. Eventually it became a huge commercial and residential area. Now, here's what Main Street looked like in 1920. Here's how it looks right now. Now, Flushing, Queens has many historical places. Built in 1661, generations of the Bound family lived here until 1945, when the family donated it and it became a museum. The old Quaker Meeting House, built in 1694, it is believed to be the oldest house of worship in New York State. This is the home of inventor Louis H. Latimer. Now, when he worked for Thomas Edison, he developed and improved filament to make light bulbs last longer. Flushing Meadows Corona Park. Originally, this was just a local dump, but it was transformed into a beautiful park in 1939 for the first of two World's Fairs. It is one of the largest and well-used community parks. Its centerpiece, well, it's a 12-story high unisphere for the 1964 World's Fair.
There is the symbol of the fair, the great unisphere.
And the park is also home to the Queens Museum and the Arthur Ashe Tennis Stadium. And get this, right next door, it's Citi Field, home of the New York Mets. Now right here is the old RKO Keats Theater. Now this was one of the most famous theaters back then in New York, and it goes back to the time of when silent movies were around. But as you can see, it's being torn down and made condominiums. You know, there was another famous theater in 1914 called the Ritz. Now we're going to show you the connection between the Ritz and St. Andrew's Church when we come back here on City of Churches. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back. We're here at St. Andrew's Avellino's Church here in Flushing, Queens, and I'm with Pastor Father Joseph Holcomb. Father, thank you for bringing us here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I'm glad you are here, Anthony.
Well, you know what? Before we go any further, you were telling me something before, and I think it's kind of cool that the audience knows this.
This was my first assignment after ordination.
Okay.
So I was ordained at St. Michael's in Flushing, which is our neighbor, and about 3 weeks later, I got my assignment here to St. Andrew Avellino. So for the first years of my priesthood, from 1980 to 1986, I was here.
But now you're here again.
I am. And actually, I was explaining to someone just a while ago that your first parish is always your first love, because there are so many people you meet as a newly ordained priest. Coming back 25 years later, so many of the same people are still here, and it was a joy to serve them.
Our viewers are going to see this. There's so much beautiful work in here. I mean,
It's truly a gem, Anthony, I got to tell you. And it was the genius of the second pastor, Monsignor Francis Exler, who built this magnificent structure. He was a student in Rome, and he brought so much of his love of art and beautiful churches back here to Flushing.
well, you know what? As we can see, some of the, I guess you would say murals, almost look like they belong in the Sistine Chapel.
Sure.
Can you tell our viewers about the history of the church?
Sure, yeah. Back in 1912, there were 11 men who petitioned Bishop MacDonald for a parish here. The parish closest was St. Michael's in Flushing, where I was ordained a priest. This area was just exploding with population. There were homes being built all over. And they went to the bishop, and 2 years later, he established the parish of St. Andrew Avellino here, right on Northern Boulevard.
I understand the first Mass wasn't in the original church?
Correct. Yeah, when the parish was established, down the road on Northern Boulevard and 154th Street, and the street names were different at the time. However, there was a movie theater called the Ritz Movie Theater. Like a lot of different parishes throughout Brooklyn and Queens or all throughout the country, sometimes we relied upon the generosity of people who had a place where Mass could be celebrated. And the Ritz Theater was owned by a parishioner who said, come on in, you can have Mass here, the first Mass.
Last year, I did my parish. That used to be the tent church. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And it also kind of is a testimony to the early community here at St. Andrew Avellino that the most important thing for them was not so much a structure, but it was celebrating the Eucharist and coming together as a parish church, as a parish community. That's what was more important. It was the people. It wasn't so much the structure.
When was this church built?
This particular church was completed in 1940. There was an original church where the rectory now stands. That was completed in, I think it was 1915. And the cornerstone from the original church is actually embedded in the back of our church here at the current church. And so you can see exactly when that cornerstone was laid. After a while, because of the explosion of population, as I was saying, they needed a larger church. And when Monsignor Exler became pastor after the death of Father McGoldrick, he began the process of putting together plans for this magnificent structure.
But the work and the detail that went into a church like this, St. Patrick's Cathedral, St. Joseph's Cathedral, I walk through them and I go, oh my God, you couldn't replicate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Just the murals, as you mentioned before, they weren't here originally when the church opened in 1940, primarily because Monsignor wanted to have artists come from Italy. And there was one particular man who he had wanted to commission but couldn't come because of World War II. It wasn't until after the war had ended and we had made peace, in a sense, with Italy, that he was able to come to the United States and complete all of these magnificent murals. Living in the parish at the time when the new church was being built was the Ronzoni family. They were the ones who backed the painter coming from Italy who made these magnificent murals in the church. And they had their factories on Northern Boulevard in Long Island City, but they lived here in this part of Flushing. And they were very, very generous to Monsignor Exler.
There's somebody else you said now.
Yeah, living right across the street from the rectory. I know many people are familiar with the Balducci's.
Sure.
They started in Greenwich Village with a magnificent store of all Italian specialties, and they also opened other stores called Grace's Marketplace, and the Balducci family used to live right across the street. Mr. and Mrs. Balducci used to come to the Italian Mass here at St. Andrew's, and their grandchildren, they no longer live in the parish, they live out on the island, but they still come to visit, and they're still very much a support to the parish.
Why was the church named after St. Andrew?
St. Andrew Avellino is a great, great saint. He was born in Sicily. He did primarily all of his work in Naples, and he is actually the patron of Naples. He was a lawyer and entered the Theatine Order. Theatine Order was begun by St. Cajetan, and worked with the poor and with the people of Naples. He was a great preacher. He was a good friend of St. Charles Borromeo at the time, and actually died as he was celebrating the Eucharist. So his very special thing is the fact that he is the patron of those people who experience a sudden death. The reason why he was chosen as the patron here, and the parish was named after him, was because at the time, Bishop MacDonald was experiencing priests in the diocese dying of either heart attacks or strokes in a sudden fashion. And so he chose St. Andrew Avellino as the patron of this parish so that St. Andrew would protect his priests. So it's a beautiful, beautiful story of how, because he's the patron of those who die suddenly, the bishop wanted, especially for his priests and for his people, to have someone to pray to regularly. We found these coins of St. Andrew Avellino, and on the back is a prayer, especially for people who have experienced a stroke. We gave them out at our 100th anniversary to all of our parishioners, and we have gotten requests from all over the country for those coins so that people could pray for family members or people that they knew or loved who died in that special way or have had a stroke of some kind, to pray that special prayer to St. Andrew Avellino.
St. Andrew Avellino, patron saint of strokes and high blood pressure, please intercede for me and protect me from stroke. Pray for my healing and restore me to perfect health. Amen.
Now, my other question was, the architecture is designed after what pattern, would you say?
It's Art Deco. And actually, a parishioner had showed me a book of some of the best Art Deco examples of Art Deco architecture in the country. And we're, in fact, the only church that's mentioned in that book. And there are pictures of the interior of the church and the exterior, because at that time, it was the way to go, in a sense. That was the architecture of the time.
Father, what are some other unique things about this church?
One of the things that I'm just amazed at were the choice of the statues that Monsignor Exler had brought from Italy again. If you notice, they're all made of wood. We have St. John Vianney, St. Jude, we have St. Dominic, St. Francis, St. Ignatius, we have St. Patrick, of course, and St. Teresa of the Little Flower. They were made specifically in a place called Ortese, which is in the north of Italy. And they're just magnificent examples of wood carving. And to see the detail, it's just incredible. You can actually see hands, roses carved over by St. Teresa of the Little Flower that are just absolutely beautiful.
Father, have there been any major renovations since the church?
Oh, sure, yeah. I would say the first big thing happened after a fire.
That's what I was going to ask you, because it says in my notes here that there was a fire here in 1973.
In 1973, yeah. It started in the sacristy and actually charred the, as you're looking at the altar, the right wall, which had beautiful, beautiful murals on it. And unfortunately, because of the fire, not only did they have to repair that wall, but also the other side, because it wouldn't match any longer, they painted over the mural. Now, if you notice the stained glass windows, both of them are depicting different scenes, this side from the Old Testament and this side from the New Testament, and the murals kind of reflected that as well. And of course, it was lost in the fire. After that, Monsignor Fitzgibbon, who was the third pastor of the parish, he renovated it to the requirements of the Second Vatican Council. So there was an altar created, made out of marble, that is what we actually are using at this point. And then in 1996, Monsignor Jim Grace, who was the fifth pastor, excuse me, he did what you now see as the major renovation. He put the baptismal font, which we never had a permanent baptismal font in the church. We have a magnificent baptismal room, which we have turned into a saint's chapel. But he decided to put in a beautiful, beautiful baptismal font in the middle of the church.
And since you were talking about the saints' room, can you tell our viewers a little more about that?
Sure. You know, I've had many requests of additional statues to be placed in the church. Unfortunately, because of the architecture and the iconography of this particular church, it's hard to just place a statue in a particular corner. Exactly. So I thought, how could we do this? There were 4 doors in the baptismal font, which were closets. So I asked a particular liturgical designer, his name is Anthony D'Ambrosio, I said, what do you think we could do back here? Well, we figured out a plan, and we have 4 statues that were never there before. So we have Padre Pio, we have St. John Paul II, we have almost to be canonized Mother Teresa, and we have St. Andrew Kim, a Korean saint, actually the first of the Korean martyrs. We have St. Michael, and we have images of Our Lady of Guadalupe, as well as Divine Mercy. And it's a place where people can pray, people can just have a little quiet time in front of their favorite saint.
You restored the bells in the tower in 2008?
I did not.
Well, but
Monsignor Grace did, sure. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but as a result of, we never had bells in the bell tower. It was always a Carolyn kind of a system, electronic system. And because of after a while with rain and snow and the weather and all the different conditions that we experience here in the Northeast, it started to deteriorate, so they had to be renewed, and they were, and now we ring out at every half hour. You hear the bells of St. Andrew's in the entire neighborhood.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
How many people can you fit in this church?
Well, right now we fit about 900. Very, very comfortably. Wow. It's a very, very large church.
It's amazing. 900 people. I noticed that, you know, when the church is built, neighborhoods change. Mm-hmm. People come and go, different nationalities come in, How has this neighborhood changed?
Oh, it's been in constant flux. Since its beginning, it's primarily been Irish Americans, right from Ireland, in some cases, Italian Americans and immigrants from Italy. As time has gone on, the immigration has changed drastically, I would say in the past 25 years. You may have noticed along Northern Boulevard, we have many, many Korean stores and restaurants. During the 80s, the Korean population began to come into the Flushing area, and it's been a continual flow. Not only Koreans from Asia, but also Chinese people are in the neighborhood now. And it's just been a great, great boom for the area, to be honest with you. We have what's called every year something called Multicultural Weekend, in a sense. What we do is we have a special mass and we invite all of the different cultures that are part of our parish. And they range from Irish, Italian, Polish, Filipino, Korean, Chinese. We have people from different parts of Africa. We have different parts of Eastern Europe represented. We have people from South America, from Central America. And so this entire area is like a League of Nations. So we try to celebrate it as much as we can.
That's really nice.
It's great. It really is.
Well, you've told us some very interesting things. Now, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, Father Holcomb is going to tell us about something very unique here at St. Andrew's. The founding father of St. Andrew's Avellino Parish, Father Edward McGoldrick, was instrumental in establishing a local branch of the Queens Public Library in this neighborhood. He even served on its board of trustees until his death in 1930, and soon after that, the branch was renamed in his honor. It is only one of 4 Queens libraries named after people instead of neighborhoods, but even today, it is the only one without an image of his namesake. It is hoped that a photo of Father McGoldrick will finally be displayed there in the near future. Well, we're back, and Father, you said you were going to show us something very interesting here at St. Andrew's.
Sure, yeah. You know, a couple of years ago when I became pastor of St. Andrew Avellino, one of our priests of the diocese who is from the parish gifted us with something very, very special. See, when I was here the first time, he actually worked in the rectory and then ultimately was ordained to the priesthood. He was studying in Rome at the time, and he came home because St. Andrew Avellino was his parish with a first-class relic of St. Andrew. Actually, that's a piece of his bone.
Really?
And so he gifted it to us just around the time of our 100th anniversary. And since then, we've had it enshrined right under the statue of St. Andrew Avellino. So it's a great, great gift to us to have St. Andrew present among us. The other thing, too, which is interesting about this parish, we're the only parish in the United States with the name St. Andrew Avellino. There is another one, I know, in Naples, in Italy, and there may be one other place in Italy with its name, but we're quite unique here in the country to have the great patron of St. Andrew Avellino.
That's amazing, and actually have him spiritually as well as physically
here.
in here.
He's in the sanctuary looking over the entire community. And on either side of the walls, there is the actual story of St. Andrew Avellino. It's written in Latin, but basically it kind of explains to you just exactly what I explained to you before in terms of his life, his ministry, and his ultimate sainthood. A very interesting thing about the church as well is when Monsignor Exler built this beautiful structure, he wanted to make the altar and everything around it the focal point so that everyone's attention would be brought to the altar of sacrifice. And that's why we have this magnificent, magnificent reredos. He wanted people to focus on some important things, and one of them was the words of St. Paul out of the letter to the Corinthians, when he says that the most important things for a Christian is faith, hope, and charity. And the greatest of these is charity or love. And that's why we have the words caritas written on above the reredos. Now, interestingly enough, on the sides, we won't forget faith and hope because they're imprinted on the sides of the marble reredos. So that's what we profess. But again, emphasizing what St. Paul emphasized in his letter to the Corinthians, that love, that charity was the most important thing for any Christian.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Father, you explained something to me off camera. Can you explain to my viewers about this?
Sure, absolutely. Years ago, when we would have things like Eucharistic devotion and we would have 40 hours devotion, because this is such a large church, we would want to have a monstrance big enough to be seen by everyone in the church. Well, when they exposed the Blessed Sacrament, basically what would happen is the crucifix would turn around, and there is a platform for the monstrance to be placed so that everyone in the church could view the Blessed Sacrament during that very special time of Eucharistic adoration. So, and we also use it on Good Friday. It's the one time that we use it currently because what happens after the liturgy of the Lord's death, suffering and death, what we do is we remove the crucifix so that there's no visible sign of a crucifix in the church until we come back on Holy Saturday for the Easter Vigil.
Wow. Father, I want to thank you because this is an amazing church. And I hope our viewers enjoyed this because I truly want to thank you for inviting us here to St. Andrew's. And I just want to tell our viewers, that's it for this episode. But if you have any questions about St. Andrew's or any other church that you'd like to recommend, please follow us on our website at www.netnewyork.tv. Or you can write into us at City of Churches at 1712 10th Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11215. Until next time, I'm Anthony Mangano with Father Holcomb in St. Andrew's. Thank you for watching, and God bless.